Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. We will be starting at the top of the hour. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today's recruiting webinar. We will be starting shortly. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our recruiting webinar today. Many people are still trying to get online, so we will be starting shortly. Morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock here in the UK. Attendees are joining fast and furious, so let's give everyone another minute to get online, and then we'll commence this webinar on recruiting. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on reimagining recruiting in the new normal. This is part of AKT's Insight series, where AKT has been an SAP partner for more than a dozen years. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle and the facilitator of today's webinar. All attendees are in listen-only mode. On your panel, you are able to ask questions through the text box. If your computer audio drops during this webinar, you can switch to the phone audio options that were provided in your confirmation email. Before I pass this webinar to our presenters, let me first introduce AKT to those who are first-time participants to this webinar. AKT is one of the largest SAP Cloud People Solutions consultancies in the EMEA region, with more than 140 consultants in local businesses across 6 countries, including in France, the UK, Czech Republic, Switzerland, and other countries. We are a full-service provider of SAP solutions across SuccessFactors, SAP Sales Cloud, WorkZone, and Qualtrics. And globally, we have run over 350 SuccessFactors projects. We offer our customers a broad range of HR advisory and consultancy and support services, from cloud implementations to change management and end-user communications and training. So, on to today's webinar. Our presenters today are Eitan Bernstein, Managing Partner of AKT's People Advisory Business, Jessica Boyko, our SuccessFactors Recruiting and Onboarding Team Leader, and myself, Head of Marketing. So, based on your pre-webinar questionnaire, whoops, there we go, that you completed earlier, this webinar will cover the following topics. So, you've told us that you want to learn how coronavirus has impacted your talent acquisition practices. Eitan will be covering that topic at the start of this webinar. Following that, Jessica will be covering how these best practices can be incorporated into your SuccessFactors recruiting system. Also, to help you better understand SuccessFactors functionality based on the new releases that we had in H1 2020 and the upcoming release that will be happening this month. As well, she will be covering some specific opportunities to leverage your current SuccessFactors investment in light of coronavirus. So again, if you have any questions, please tap them into the questions box and we will address them at the end of the session. And without further ado, over to you, Eitan.
Thank you, Michelle. So I don't know if do you see my screen? You should see my screen now.
We do, thank you.
Wonderful. So good morning, everyone. Great having you all here. I don't think it's new to anyone on this call. Many of you probably sitting at home and not in your office and maybe in pajamas, that this has been an interesting period. In the last 7-8 months, the world has really changed on us. and it's definitely an era of total disruption. If this picture looks familiar, feels like some of our challenges that many of us are feeling every day, there's good reason for that. And obviously, over the last 7, 8 months, depending on where you are in the world and when COVID-19 hit you, there's been a giant impact of this pandemic on business, and as a result on HR, and of course on the talent acquisition practice and what organizations are doing around that. And that's what we want to talk about today. I assume many of you on the call have heard of the term VUCA. You can see that it's an acronym for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we've been using VUCA to describe the world, the changing world over the last decade. I don't think anyone really realized how complex we're going to get and expected what really volatility looks like. What we're experiencing now is volatility at its best. It's uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen next week, the next lockdown, what's going to be open, what we can do. Our organizations are struggling to plan in that. So complex and ambiguous. And in that environment, obviously, it's very, very difficult to adapt quickly and to what the changing needs are in general and in talent acquisition specifically. It's not surprising to anyone on this call that the employment market has completely changed in the last few months. In the last decade, until the COVID pandemic began, in most of the Western world, and most of the world in general, we had a great 10 years of a run of continuous growth in employment. And many countries in the world found themselves in February and March 2020 at the eve of the pandemic at the lowest unemployment rates in history, with 3 and 4%, 5% in many of the developed markets. And of course, we all in talent acquisition aligned our practices to that market. So our market is definitely a candidate market. We spoke every day about the lack of candidates, the competition for candidates, the need to be very creative in sourcing candidates, the need to be very unique in creating a clear value proposition and great candidate experience to be able to compete in that very aggressive market. And obviously the world has changed significantly, and we're in a very, very different world post or within this pandemic. I'm sure you're all reading every day around significant layoffs. These are all from the last few weeks. And most economists would agree that this is probably continuing to come. And these are across different industries, not just entertainment like Lufthansa, like Disney, or travel like Lufthansa, but energy like Shell and Continental, which is a supplier to the automotive industry and a very large employer in Germany and Europe, are hit very hard and laying off thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of employees. And I think most of us are aware that actually it's the largest and strongest employers like these that are hit less. And the smaller and small family businesses, small and medium-sized businesses that have much lower pockets or smaller pockets are hit much harder in the pandemic and in the need to align. Obviously, I'm making a generalization because not all industries and not all jobs are impacted in the same way. Although most industries and most jobs have been impacted. And these are just some data really recently, Indeed from the UK from a week ago, October 2nd, comparing job postings in different types of jobs or job families to the same day a year ago. Okay, and as you can see in many of the types of jobs, we're looking at 50 and 60% less than a year ago. And very few, the only one mentioned in this Indeed publication that has grown from a year ago was a medical technician. And I think we can understand why that's a job that's growing. And from the US, very similar data, LinkedIn, end of September, comparing to a year ago, again, 20 and 30 and 40% under in many of the industries, with only a few. Interesting: transportation and logistics, not surprising. Agriculture barely impacted. Healthcare pretty much flat. Wellness and fitness with growing, actually, with people having more time to take care of their health and do things while they're at home. So obviously this isn't consistent. And even within the same markets, we'll find that there are jobs and job families that may be still hiring and under great need, and others that are that we have much too many of in a surplus. Oh, right. Yeah, and as a result, it's not surprising that what we're seeing is also that most organizations are hiring less. So they're laying off people. There's many more people in the workforce, and most organizations are hiring less. So this is a recent McKinsey study on the left showing that HR is expected to do a lot less recruiting and onboarding in the last 12 months, in the next 12 months. Over 2/3 of the organizations think that they're going to be doing a lot less investment in recruiting and onboarding, given their expectations of the market. And this Indeed graph shows that even after some markets have started to improve in the last few months, that we're still almost 50% under the level of job postings at this point a year ago and 2 years ago. And this is before the unknown of what's going to happen in the winter with the second wave and as the winter months, cold winter months come in on us. So we're obviously in a situation where there's many more candidates available in the market and much less hiring by organizations. And that's creating some very interesting challenges. We asked you in the pre-webinar survey, what are your challenges? And we got some interesting responses. So this is results from 52 of you who responded to our pre-webinar survey. So an interesting response, which we'll relate to later, is that actually most of you still see your number one challenge, or many of you as a number one challenge of enhancing candidate experience. And I think that's great. We'll relate to the importance of candidate experience in this market later. Answers that got the second and the fourth largest, the remote assessment tools and effective remote screening. And obviously, and we'll talk about this a lot, moving to a completely remote process has driven organizations to find remote solutions to do assessment and screening in an effective way. And I'll mark, because we're going to talk about that as well, the fifth item here on the list that you identified, which is expand internal mobility. We're seeing that as well as a major trend and a challenge many organizations have taken upon themselves, and we'll relate to that as well. So there's a lot of alignment between what you are experiencing in your organization and what we're going to show at this point on what the major trends are. So what are we seeing as the major trends? So three areas that are relatively new and really emerging in the last few months, and we'll talk about the implications of each one of them, and Jessica will then also show how SuccessFactors is adopted or can be used better to address these challenges, or these three. We're seeing a candidate overload, and I'll talk about what that means and how organizations are dealing with that. Of course, and this is clear to everyone, organizations have been forced to move to a virtual world, to a virtual process, and what the implications and best practices that are emerging around that. And interestingly, and we'll talk about why and how they're dealing with it, organizations are looking internally even more than in the past. That's been an important trend all across in the last few years, but has been accelerated like other trends in the movement in the changes that are coming upon us. So let's dive into every one of these three briefly. So the candidate overload. So if we think about many more millions of candidates out in the market looking for jobs, and many fewer jobs available on the market in many areas, not all, but in many areas, we're finding a bombardment of candidates, and organizations are finding it harder to pick out the best talent or the best fit within this larger haystack. And organizations are complaining about how we deal with this, how we deal with the complexity, with the amount, what we can do to ease the work. And indeed, we're seeing that the challenges of the talent acquisition team and hiring managers have really shifted in most industries. If in the past, on the left, the two challenges that most organizations had were in sourcing quality candidates or qualified candidates. So how do we get more and more candidates into the pipeline? Because we're struggling in bringing good qualified candidates in. And then once they're in, How do we ensure that we keep them in, that we're selling them our company, that we're very attractive to them, that we're creating a great candidate experience so that we get at least 2 or 3 great candidates toward the end of the funnel? The challenges change when the funnel starts so broadly. And one of the main challenges organizations are struggling today is how do we effectively and quickly screen out the masses of candidates that we're getting for some of the roles in the beginning, so that we're not dealing with these big numbers, but we can quickly get to a much more efficient process around the few that are really the best candidates for the job, the best fitting candidates for the job. So it's a very different focus of where most of the energy is going and where organizations have transitioned. Of course, for some of you, you're doing both. You have types of jobs and maybe geographies and maybe business units that are still behaving under the old process, and other areas that are behaving around the new on the right side. So how are organizations doing that? So one of the things is using much more automation and much more digital assessment solutions to quickly and effectively narrow down candidate overload. So we're seeing organizations design processes that are much more automated and can very quickly, definitely in mass recruiting populations, whether it's manufacturing, call centers, logistics and other areas like that, but even in professional jobs, go through a whole set of steps, almost totally automated, that result in the organization having to deal with a much narrower, high quality pipeline very quickly. So as an example, one kind of way organizations are doing this is described here. So we're driving candidates to our website, having those candidates fill in some auto qualification, disqualification questions. So provide some information which, based on their answers, at least some of them can be screened and auto disqualified. Then sending those ones who aren't auto disqualified, automatically sending them digital assessment solutions, having them fill out a test or 2 or 3, maybe 15, 20 minutes of activity. And based on their test results, doing another level of screening. Maybe after that, automatically sending them an automated video interview, and we'll show you what that means in a second for those of you maybe not acquainted. And based on an AI analysis of that interview, doing another level of screening. So through these 3 steps of auto disqualification questions, of digital assessment, and a video interview, automated video interview, we basically can rank candidates based on all the parameters and information collected, and provide the recruiting team and the hiring managers, for the first time that they need to look at them and touch them, a much narrower pool of candidates. One of the things we see, again, as we mentioned, use a lot more of video assessment, of automated video assessment. This isn't using just doing interviews by video, but actually having AI tools do this. And just to show what we mean by that, for those of you who may not have had a chance to see such tools, here's 1.5 minutes of a very short video.
What you're seeing is a job candidate using Aon's speech-to-text artificial intelligence. How? By recording herself in response to questions presented on the screen. The questions link to personality traits in response to how she acts in specific situations. The AI extracts what she says and creates a transcript, all while removing any auxiliary data and standardizing input for further algorithm processes. The natural language processing AI then goes through the text, identifying words and phrases that would potentially be used by expert raters to score the answer. The AI is trained to work with actual behavioral indicators to create a fair and transparent process. This ensures the data is handled in a glass box approach instead of a black box AI approach, replicating and enhancing the best human raters method of finding positive and negative behavioral indicators. These are linked to different personality traits used to formulate a score for each trait and for each candidate. The personality model that the AI is rating against is Aon's validated Adept 15 framework. The final scores for each candidate are generated in reports or in candidate management systems automatically. Recruiters can leverage the AI scores for rank ordering or screening candidates in the hiring process. making informed hiring decisions easy.
So that's one, just one example of a type of tool and process that can really simplify and automate the process. And just an example of the value and possible ease of that. This is a case study of a 10,000 person pharmaceutical company that by implementing automated video interviewing had cut down the investment of each recruiter in filling a position around screening and forwarding candidates from 90 hours on an average to 24 hours per position. That's pretty amazing and significant. And at least in their report, without impacting the quality of the hires, maybe even improving it and focusing much more time on other activities of higher value in the organization. So potentially really, really meaningful savings, efficiency, and quality in this process. And actually, when we asked you in the survey before this webinar, where are you? So two at least of the ideas that we shared, many of you are already using, with 29% of those responded already using auto disqualification questions in the recruiting process. I think that's a quick opportunity for the 71% of you who are not yet doing that to consider how to do that and implement that within your success factors so that you can narrow candidates down much faster. And 14% of you are already using digital assessment tools, and you should look at how they're integrated into your process and into your systems to make everything much more streamlined. So that's what some of the ideas of around candidate overload. The next thing is around moving to virtual, and moving to virtual is not trivial. Many organizations just in the beginning continued to do exactly what they did face-to-face and just try to do it over Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you're using. And that's not exactly the right way to go. The entire candidate journey has become virtual. And it's interesting, the entire employee journey has become virtual. I just spoke with a CHRO of one of my largest clients who said, you know, we already have individuals who were interviewed and hired by our company virtually, joined the company virtually, worked for the company virtually, and 7 or 8 months later have resigned from the company virtually. They never met a single person in the organization, and they never visited any of our sites. So that's a world we're growing to learn and deal with, and how to deal with it. And it's not surprising that in a recent survey by Mercer, 74% of organizations that are hiring, and many are, have changed their recruiting processes significantly. So just a few of the things that we're seeing as some of those major changes. So in addition to things like I presented, generally increasing use of digital assessment tools, both because they're efficient, they're automated, they're effective, because of the quality of the data that can be achieved through them. When we're interviewing virtually, interviewers struggling to get quality information, and so looking for other ways of doing that and making the process more asynchronic so the candidates can do things offline. It's not necessarily dependent on the availability of the recruiters or the hiring managers to do that. A lot of advantages to using more digital assessment tools within this ecosystem. We're seeing the need to experience and sell your company better to candidates. So if in the past we used to bring people in for interviews, give them a tour of the site, let them experience some of the company and its culture, maybe even in global companies, fly them in to meet people, then obviously in this pandemic era, it's much harder to have people experience the company. And there's a great case study just published on Harvard Business Review from Twitter, and how they've really put an effort on how you experience Twitter in the recruiting process when you can't come visit, how you create an immersion through video, through receiving gifts and information, through the way the interactions are managed, so that we really create that value. And another thing that's very important and some companies have overlooked is how we capture information that replaces informal channels. So many of you recognize that in the past, we made a lot of hiring decisions like this picture, right? The hiring manager, the recruiter, maybe one of the interviews would have met at the coffee corner and discussed the candidate, decided how to move forward. As we've all moved to be virtual, the need to have much more documentation, to capture information, to have that all available across our recruiting platform has become even more important And then making that simple and easy to do is critical for the success of the process. And many organizations are realizing that moving from a physical interview to remote and online interviewing is not trivial and requires development of skills for both the recruiters and the hiring managers. And there are many areas that need development. That some of them are more trivial, but many are less and require spending the time and the effort to help managers learn how managers and recruiters learn how to manage the context and the situation of a video interviewing, which is different and much harder to be effective than when we're face to face. So organizations are investing in these. These are just some examples of the types of important things that when we're developing those skills, we need to look at and organizations are doing. So the third area where we're seeing more and more change is a lot of focus internally on the internal labor market. And that's not surprising. Organizations are getting much closer, they're shutting down and closing and have a much less ability to bring candidates from outside in this current market. Less people are resigning, or in most organizations, turnover, voluntary turnover has gone down to practically zero, with people worried about resigning in this labor market. So there's no people leaving, opening new opportunities. And most organizations, and many organizations, have restricted completely or limited significantly the ability to hire externally. So we really have a very closed market in most organizations. And at the same time, the business situation and has created a situation where there's a change in demand and shifting business needs, which means we need to meet people between products and services. We have jobs changing, we need different skills. I'm working with one of the major banks here that closed its branches for a lot of its activities, which means all those people in the branches need to move to support their digital services. And that's a whole change in skills and ways of interacting that is required. So obviously organizations are looking inward much, much more as they're doing this. And just a few creative examples. So this is an example of an interesting data company that had a number of cleaning employees, and sent them home because they closed the offices, and was, because they're a very quality organization, they said, we're not going to fire them and we want to keep paying them. But what can we do with them if they're already sitting at home? And they have a whole department that does tagging of information, pictures and other things. And so they train those mostly cleaning ladies to do that. And they're actually very happy with the results. Everyone feels that they're contributing to the success of the company, that they're not sitting at home and getting paid. So that's a very creative and obviously not trivial example. But there are many, many more examples. One which is worth recommend reading. There's a whole, we can send the sources later, a whole paper about this. Cisco has moved a lot of its internal focus on their internal marketplace. And this is just an example of how, in a very, very structured way, has been looking at what are the skills that we need that are mostly in demand. How do we identify those internally? Where are the adjacent skills? What are the feeder roles that are similar? Where should we be looking for people that have close to those skills so the gaps aren't big? And how do we develop and transition those individuals there? So how do we understand our internal labor market better and utilize close skills and more trivial movements to be able to be successful? And some organizations are even looking at sharing talent. So when you're in a market, in a city, in a country where some industries are growing rapidly and need more people, and others are getting shut down, we're finding interesting examples where organizations are borrowing employees. We need employees, you're sending them home. We want them temporarily. You don't want to let go of them. Why don't we just share employees? And we're seeing creative examples like Hema, Alibaba's retail grocery store, which is sharing 3,000 employees from more than 40 other companies that are temporarily moved over, still employed by their other employer, when will eventually return. And that's not the only example of markets that have developed some sharing solutions so that everyone gains out of that. So those are the three new things. What isn't new, and you mentioned that in your survey, was the importance of candidate experience, which continues to be very, very important in this day as well. And just to say a word about that, why do we need to continue to look at candidate experience, well, even if this is an employer market, what goes up must come down. We've seen significant ups and downs over the years, so we're sure that the market will improve. And when it does, we don't want a lot of people who look at our organization and the experience that they had as a poor one. We know that there's a strong connection from many industries and many types of companies between the candidate experience and the customer or consumer experience. And this is a great case study by Virgin Media that when they reject candidates and they do it in a poor way, then they lose their subscriptions, and that has an immediate impact on their business. So definitely B2C companies need to be very sensitive about that. We know that candidates are very, very informed, and they're using platforms where they can get tons of information. And when you do a bad job around managing candidate experience, that has a long-term impact on many more people than that individual. And candidates are increasingly activistic or activist around what their experience is. And in this market, even more than ever. So we know that over 60% of job seekers have a poor candidate experience, and most of them immediately go online and share that experience on Glassdoor or other social networking sites. So that's really critical to be aware that even in this market, we want to make sure that we are very sensitive to how we manage our candidates. I won't go through this just to leave enough time for Jessica, but I will say that when a candidate has a poor experience in a journey, that has many, many implications to what happens and how they view the company. So when a candidate has a poor experience with an organization, they often stop buying their products, they often post a negative review, they share that experience with others and will not apply again. But a candidate that has a positive experience, even when that experience is that they were turned down in the end and weren't accepted in the organization, they refer other friends to the company, they keep tracking open opportunities and look for them again. 97% of candidates who had a good experience, even when they weren't accepted, refer others to that organization, and 95% would reapply. So you're gaining a candidate for life when those candidates have a good experience, and the market will turn around, and it's really important to have those candidates in the market. And there are great ideas out there on how to create excellent candidate experience, not only for the ones you hire, but maybe in particular when there's so many candidates are going to turn down in this period, for the rejected candidates. How you deliver the news. You know, is it a cold email or WhatsApp, or is it a much more sensitive way of delivering the news? What feedback you provide to the candidates around their assessment, around their fit, about why they weren't accepted. Whether you ask for feedback from the candidates. Candidates who have the opportunity to give feedback to the hiring organization, even if they weren't accepted, feel valued and want to continue to interact. Offering those individuals to connect on social media, send them proactively recruiting newsletter and keep them aware of what's going on in your organization, and invite them to company events. Today it's all virtual and many of them are free, so keep the interaction with them. All things that are not difficult to do and will be very valuable in the future as when the market turns around. We see organizations doing an excellent job, some organizations doing an excellent job in really emphasizing their culture, their values, and their employer value proposition at this time. Walmart is hiring 150,000 associates and doing many, many things. Just as an example, one company doing many things to emphasize and communicate their culture and their values in this time. And organizations that will be strong with their culture and very visible with their values will gain in this period. And companies that are getting nervous around the situation are the ones who will pay a price later. And one of the really critical things is talking and listening to candidates throughout the process, using tools like Qualtrics, integrated into the recruiting process to get a lot more feedback. How did you hear about us when you apply? How was the application process so we can continuously improve it? What was my impression in my activities with the organization? Was there open communication? Did I get the information? All those questions that can be seeded throughout the recruiting process to get much, much more feedback from the candidates. So with that, I'll just say these three areas of managing a candidate over and remote, the force to virtual and the focus on internal labor market are really what we're seeing most organizations focusing on today. And not forgetting the importance of continuously improving, enhancing the candidate experience so we don't lose on that in the long term and in the short term. With that, I'll pass this over to Jessica. Just with the last information from your survey, it seems from the answers you've given us that about 1/3 of you on this call are considering implementation of the different modules relating to recruiting. About 1/3 are already in the process of implementing, and about 1/3 are already using the different modules relating to recruiting. And so we hope that now that you'll see how the tools can enhance your implementation or improve the utilization that you already have through some of the new things that Jessica will emphasize. Jessica, to you.
Hi, thank you, Ethan. Hi, everyone. 1 second. I hope you can see my screen now. Okay. So before I show you and we dive into the system features, I always like to have a quick view on how the recruiting process look like for the ones that not know the system yet, success factors. So in a very high level, it always starts by the identification that we need to hire someone. It can be from a replacement or from a new position that was created. We can open the requisition for the recruiting from a position in the system and automating the process by mapping all the relevant information into the job requisition. For example, organization information. So what will be the division or the department that we need to hire. So the person who is opening the requisition don't need to fill all the information, and it's already connected to the future position of the hired candidate. Once opened the requisition, we will go through the process of sourcing and job posting. Sorry. So once open the requisition, we will go through an approval flow, totally customizable depending on the needs of the company. And once approved is when we can post the requisition or we can source the candidate from our candidate pool. Once we have the candidates applying to the job requisition, they can be internal candidates, external candidates, candidates referred by employees, or candidates who came from agencies, is when we start the screening of those candidates. It's when actually the fun starts. The candidates will arrive to a pipeline built depending on the needs of every company. So again, it's a total customizable pipeline. And in the pipeline, we will find normally steps as new application, phone interview, shortlist to the manager, interview steps, rejected steps, and more. As you can see, once we find the candidate that we want to hire, we will be able to run an internal offer. So we have the offer management. Basically, the internal offer is to get an approval of what we want to offer to the candidate internally before extending it to the candidate, before extending the offer approval to the candidate. And once the internal offer is approved, we extend the offer to the candidate using the system features. So basically, we can extend it electronically, and the candidate can accept it, the offer, or declining it, of course, using the SuccessFactors online signature or even integrating the system with DocuSign. From this step, depending what modules you have, we can or initiate an onboarding process or create the candidates in Employee Central, mapping all the information collected during the recruiting process, such the candidate information, but also the position information. So now that in a very high level, we understand the flow, we can start deep diving into some features that might be helpful to deal better with the COVID situation, or they're just nice features to have, because some days, and I really hope, the COVID will go and we will be back to normal. The first feature I would like to present is the quick apply. We want to ensure that we have the capable tools to get the best candidates and ensure that we are not missing any good candidates because the amount of steps that he needs to do in order to apply. It was about a year ago that SuccessFactors released the quick apply feature. The standard way of SuccessFactors before the quick apply of the application was that the candidate needs first to create the account, and then when applying, in order to apply, he needs to fill the candidate profile and the application form. Now, when enabling the quick apply feature, the creation of the profile and the application are done in one page, in one-time effort, one single step, which is a huge advantage when focusing on the candidate experience. If he wants, then later he can come back to his profile and update it in order to apply again. But the important thing here is to do the apply as quicker as possible for the candidate. Our next item are the pre-screening questions, or killer questions, disqualifying questions. Actually, we have so many names to this small but so significant feature. It's not a new feature, actually, and I work with SuccessFactors for more than 10 years, and it was already there when I started. But I think that today, this tool become very relevant when looking at the COVID-19 situation. And also, if we follow what Eitan mentioned before, companies are overloaded with candidates, and this feature will help to do preliminary reviews on the candidates. Basically, on the job requisition level, when you create it, you can add questions that will become available to the candidate when they are applying to the job. Those questions can be set as mandatory to be answered, so the candidate will be required to answer them. They can be set as disqualifying questions, meaning that if the candidate answers wrong, he will be automatically disqualified. He still will be able to apply, but he will be allocated in the pipeline in a specific step, so you still can review them. Finally, to each question, you can also set a weight. So every candidate that applies will receive an overall rating that you can sort the candidates based on this rating to start reviewing, for example, the higher scores first. Another feature that we have with the pre-screening questions is the possibility to create a library of those questions with the answers already set, and then also reduce the time that it takes to create the job requisition. You don't need really to start creating all the questions from scratch, and you just can search from the library what questions you want to present to the candidate. So as you can see, this can bring a lot of help to the recruiters to deal with the overload of candidates applying to the jobs. Another item that exists for a long time, but now it's becoming more and more relevant, also following Eitan's presentation, is the online assessment integration. As we heard before, the COVID-19 took us with a rocket speed to this place where everything needs to happen online, and it's not different when it comes to test and assessment of the candidates. The system allows to establish an integration with assessment vendors and trigger assessment from different steps of the pipeline. For example, when the candidates apply, you can initiate an assessment, or when the candidate reaches to an interview step, you can also initiate an assessment. Once this assessment is triggered, the candidate receives an email with a link to log into the assessment. And by the end of it, so once the candidate finalizes the test or the assessment, it takes a few minutes for the recruiter to have access to the candidate's results, and also the option to sort the candidates based on the score, the status of the assessment, and the final recommendation, and making the recruiter experience much better by having the results already available in SuccessFactors. So we are basically centralizing the information in one place for the recruiter. It is important to mention that the assessments are on the applicant level and not the candidate. Because of the uniqueness of assessments related to the requisition, the system does not move that data with the candidates between the different requisitions. I would like here to take a personal insight. My husband is a team leader when in these days he's searching for 2 new employees to his team. We're talking about a high-tech company which was also taken by surprise. The amount of time that he's spending interviewing, sending assessment, checking assessment, and writing summaries to the recruiter is very, very high. And today, this time, it's more precious than before. In one single day, he needs to deal with the lockdown. Yes, we are in a lockdown. And then the work, his daily work, and the interviews, and the tests, and the kids at home. Every hour that you can save from the recruiters and from the managers by utilizing better the tools that you have or implementing correctly the system will be again changing for the full experience of the managers, of the candidates, and the recruiters, And sometimes I always say that those small and obvious features are the ones that basically will make the difference in the whole experience. So continuing from the experience, we focus a lot on candidate experience, and we saw it already in the service that Ethan presented. And the base for the candidate experience is his career portal. When implementing RMK, the recruiting marketing feature in SuccessFactors, you have the option to create your own career portal for internal candidates and for externals. And I want here to emphasize the sentence, create your own site, because one of the big advantages in the RMK, in the recruiting marketing, is the career site builder, a tool where you can build your career portal site by using SuccessFactors elements. You don't need to be depending on web developers in order to have a well-designed career portal, and you don't need to depend on a web developer every time you want to make a change in the site. You want just to change a little sentence, to add another information. So this tool is very good for that, because you will have your own independency in everything that comes to your career portal, and it's very user-friendly. It can be managed by your admin of the system. This tool, and I always say that this tool, it's like a Lego. You take basically the elements and you build the site the way you want it to look like. In the last year, SuccessFactors released the option to create RMK portal for internal candidates as well. Everything that you could do till today for externals can be done today for internal candidates, building a relevant homepage or content page and more for them. Ethan was explaining before that one of the things that we are seeing is that companies are searching inside their organizations for candidates first, giving opportunity for their employees that already know the company to be able to apply to the jobs. And we want to make the internal candidate experience as good as the external candidates. You can create, as I say, content pages relevant to internal candidates. You can maintain the internal candidates updated on changes in the recruiting process based on the current situation. The more relevant information you give to the candidate, the better experience he will have. And internal candidates also deserve to have the good experience as they had before they started to work in the company. And by you having this full independency, not needed to ask now for a web developer to make those changes for you, it's again a great advantage in the system. And if we are already discussing career portals, candidates applications, and so another great tool that comes with the recruiting marketing is the advanced analytics. It's a reporting tool that will allow you to understand better the sources of the candidates, the effectiveness of the sources. So not just from where they are coming, but how effective they are, how many candidates you hired from a specific source, in which stages of the processes the candidates of a specific source are. Also understand the conversion numbers, how many candidates visited the portal, how many started an application, how many didn't finish, how many finished to apply. So not much to say here, except that it's a great tool for you to analyze what you have, the candidates. The evergreen job requisition. It's very common in those days that for a company to have one job requisition that is used to collect candidates and then forward the candidates to other job requisitions before an interview or before the hiring. And this can happen for two main reasons. The first one is companies that are searching for specific employees that are very hard to find, and they want to keep requisition always open and posted to attract the candidates. And the second reason is a company needs to hire a high volume of employees for similar positions. So you don't want to start posting all the job requisitions and confuse the candidate. You want to have one job requisition that all the candidates will come there, and then you will forward them to the correct one before the hiring, for example. So when opening a job requisition, you can set by clicking on a button if the requisition is an evergreen job requisition or not. When the requisition is set as evergreen, the system will allow you to create relationship between evergreen job requisition and other job requisitions, like a parent and child relationship, where the parent is the evergreen. The idea is that when you find a potential candidate to one of your child job requisitions, you forward the applicant to the child requisition in order to finalize the process of recruiting there. When forwarding the applicant, basically you're moving the application, you're not moving the candidate, you're moving the application from one job requisition to other without needing to invite him to apply again, because the job requisitions are already connected. So he moves to the child job requisition with all the information of the application. And these connections also, I don't even need to mention that they are also helpful in the future when running reports to better understand the sources and the candidates and the time to fill to those tricky job requisitions. Now, people analytics, probably most of you that have SuccessFactors today, so you already know that SuccessFactors is moving to the new report platform, the SAP People Analytics, the embedded. So in this platform, you can report on data from a product schema that it's not supported today by SuccessFactors. So by any of the reports tools that we have, the AdHoc, the dashboards, or the ORD. You will be able to add additional calculation functions that don't exist today. You will be able to do date calculations or Boolean field calculations. So it's a very, basically it's the next generation analytics tool of SuccessFactors. It will support better the people strategies and effective decisions making based on the better reports that you are doing. You will be able to create, as I said, better reports and also do better joining of modules in the report. So for example, think about checking the effectiveness of a source based on a performance rating of an employee once he's already hired. So now back to the user's candidate experience, there is another integration I would like to mention, and this is the Qualtrics. We all the time say that the candidate and the manager experience are very important, but how do we know we are in the correct path? How do we know what parts of our process are not working properly and what needs to be improved? So basically the question is, how can we measure the experience of the candidates? How can we measure the experience of the manager? So with the Qualtrics integration, we can run surveys among candidates or managers to measure their experience. The surveys in the recruiting module, they can be triggered in different steps of the process. So for example, you want to measure the application. So once the candidate finalizes the application, you can trigger a survey to him. When the candidate is hired, you can trigger a survey to ask for him about the whole process. You want to make a survey about his interview. So in the different steps of the pipeline, you can trigger a survey. And especially now that the processes are changing, and by having a platform to measure the process, we actually can act faster and adjust ourselves quicker by understanding the full experience of the candidate by measuring it. Another great tool to help the management of the candidate is the talent pool. One thing is to have a candidate pool where all the candidates can be found there. But another thing is to have the ability to group the candidates in talent pools. For example, create a talent pool of all the potential sales managers that you have in the candidate pool. Now, inside the talent pool, you will be able to manage those candidates by different status. For example, sales managers that you still didn't contact, and sales managers that are seeking for a job, candidates that at this moment are not interested. So you can create this group of candidates, but you can also differentiate it by different statuses. One of the great things about the talent pool is that today the system can feed the talent pools automatically. You don't need to worry of moving potential candidates all the time to the correct talent pool. You can assign to each talent pool a search parameters. So every day the system will run a job to see if there were new candidates registering to your SuccessFactors or applying to jobs. And if they answer your criteria, the system will add them automatically in the talent pool with a default status. Talent pools can also be public, so you can share them with another recruiters, or they can be private if you have a discrete talent pool for executives, for example. From your talent pool, you can view the candidate's resume, forward to a colleague, forward the candidate to a job requisition, send ad hoc emails to the candidates, and also engaging them by having this communication with your potential and start candidates. Which basically it will take me to the next item I want to discuss, that it's the great feature of the campaigns, the email campaigns in the system. Using the career site builder that we saw before, you can create landing pages and capture forms and use them in order to run a campaign to your potential candidates in the candidate pool, but also from the talent pool, where you can use to send a campaign relevant to your target population. So a campaign to sales position, we will use the talent pool of the sales managers that we created in order to run the campaign to them. The system will track after the effectiveness of your campaign. You can see how many potential candidates received the campaign, since the system only sends to the ones that accepted to receive marketing emails, how many clicked on the link of your campaign, how many viewed the campaign, or how many unsubscribes you had in your campaign. Later, you will be able to search for candidates based on the campaign in the candidate pool, or based on the capture form that they answer as part of the campaign. The combination of talent pools and campaigns will help you to use the resources that you already have, the candidates in the candidate pool, and engage with them, which is basically what we always want to engage the candidates. Recruiting posting. As we say in the beginning, once the requisition is approved, you can start posting it. And normally, what will happen is that the recruiter will go to every job board, which is a time consuming. He goes to every job board and he needs to post one by one. When using the recruiting posting, you can post from SuccessFactors to more than 3,000 job boards or schools. In order to post, you will be able to use the current information you have in the job requisition, like the job description, the location, the range salary, and more, and map it to your posting automatically. So no need here to rewrite the posting again and again in every job board. You can create business rules to select automatically the job boards that you need to post. For example, every job in the UK will be posted to LinkedIn and Monster, and every job in Spain will be posted only to LinkedIn. From the next release of SuccessFactors, you will be able also to post jobs to multiple locations, saving customers the need to post the same job multiple times. And to finalize, another tool that came to improve the recruiter's daily work. We were talking before about centralizing the work of the recruiter in only one place. And the message center, basically, it does exactly what I was saying before, the centralized. Using the message center, you can centralize the communication of the recruiter with the candidate in one place. So recruiter can directly access message center and see all the manual emails, communication, replies of the candidate to the recruiter will also be captured in the system. So again, in one place, once the recruiter goes to the candidate profile of the candidate, he can see all the communication that they had until today. Again, centralizing, not letting the recruiter to waste time on tasks that are not really related to the recruiting process, and then improving the experience of the recruiter, but also improving the experience of the candidate, having a faster process. And that's it. I want to thank you all, and I will send the presentation back to Michelle.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Aiton. Thank you to our attendees today. I see we're very close to ending, but we had a few questions. Maybe we can ask one question now. Does the internal job posting page, if created via RMK, allow for referrals?
Yes. If the question is if you can add a friend referral through the internal RMK, the answer is yes.
Fantastic. Then will people analytics be a standard feature in the recruiting module?
Sorry, Michelle, I didn't hear you.
Sorry, will people analytics be a standard feature in the recruiting module?
So it's not a standard feature. It will be with the coming of the years, it will become the core of the reporting success factors. So yes, in the end, we are going to have the recruiting reports in the SAP analytics, with some reports that come as standard. We will have some of them, yes, and you will also be able to create more, depending on your needs, on what you want to learn from your processes.
Fantastic. And I will squeeze one more question in. Eitan, you mentioned bringing more automation to the process. How is it to fit to candidate experience?
That's a good question, maybe not one for 30 seconds. There are ways to use automation that create a feeling that you're actually caring and individualized and fast. And there are ways of making it cold and distant, and where I feel like I'm working with a bot and a system and not with an organization that wants to hire me. And I think that it's more than something we can answer in a second, but it's many nuances from how things are managed, how information is communicated, the way things are written, and when human intervention fits into the process. There are ways to build pretty automated, processes that are very, very automated and yet give a feeling to the candidate that they're not being managed by technology, but by an organization that cares for them.
Fantastic. So thank you to our panelists for taking the time today to present. I know that there were additional questions, so if you posted any questions, we'll send email responses to you shortly. We will also follow up this webinar with the recording from today, as well as a survey to hear your views. With that, we hope you have a good rest of the day and a great week. Stay healthy, everyone, and thank you for joining. Goodbye.